The Type 22 frigate was the first frigate, but most importantly, the first major ship in the Royal Navy to be built without a main gun armament. No guns, only missiles. The Type 22s were designed to be specialist anti-submarine warfare vessels as part of the Royal Navy's contribution to NATO. During the service in the Royal Navy, these ships evolved into general-purpose frigates with weapons to be used against surface ships, aircraft, and also submarines. They were built in 3 batches, giving rise to 3 subclasses. The first broadswords were 4 ships, the second, Boxer, was 6 ships, and the third and final, Cornwall, was of 4 ships. The length of the first 4 Type 22 frigates was dictated by the dimensions of the undercover frigate refit complex in Devonport Dockyard. They would be 131 metres long, 14.8 metres wide, and have a draft of 6.1 metres. They would displace 4,400 tonnes and be propelled by 2 Rolls-Royce Olympus TM3B and 2 Rolls-Royce Tyne RM1C gas turbines, giving them a top speed of 30 knots. They, like the rest of these subclasses, would have a range of about 8,000 nautical miles from Portsmouth Dockyard to San Carlos Water in the Falklands, with about 1,000 miles to play with at 18 knots. They would also have a crew of about 222 ratings and officers. They would be fitted with the following weapons: 4 single Exocet anti-ship missiles located on the forecastle. These were capable of 48 nautical mile range, and these are subsonic weapons that fly at wave-top level. 2 sextuple Seawolf surface-to-air missiles, 1 forward and 1 aft. This has a range of 3.5 nautical miles. Now, it's more of a point defense weapon, not a long-range missile system. 2 Orlecan 20mm guns. These were capable of 450 rounds per minute out to 1,000 yards with a muzzle velocity of 820 meters per second. And then finally, 2 triple STWS Mark II torpedo tubes. The ships would have the following radar fits: 1 Type 967/968 early warning radar operating in the Delta/Echo Foxtrot bands. Now, this radar was able to detect contacts out to 144 nautical miles. This was located on the foremast. 2 Type 910 fire control radars for Seawolf. This operated in the India band frequencies and it had the same range as Seawolf. 1 Type 1007 navigational radar operating in the Echo Foxtrot bands. This was capable of detecting contacts out to 95.5 nautical miles. 1008 navigational radar operating in the India band frequency. This has a maximum range of 24 nautical miles. The batch 2s would be 146.5 metres long with the same beam and an increased draft of 6.4 metres. They would displace about 4,800 tonnes and they would have the same weapon systems as well as the same speed and radar fits. The number of crew would increase to 273 officers and ratings, and these 22s were called the Stretch 22s up until the point when the Batch 3s come along. The difference between the Batch 1s and 2s is the Batch 2s have a curved bow. The Batch 3s would become the best looking frigates ever made. They would be 148.1 metres long with the same beam and same draft. They'd have an increased displacement of 5,300 tonnes. They would also have a different weapons loadout. The Exocets would be ditched for 2 quad harpoon launchers located just forward of the Goalkeeper close-in weapon system. These are capable of 150 nautical mile range and with a speed of Mach 0.71. Like Exocet, these would be having an active seeker head. Again, you'd have the 2 Seawolf point defense missile systems as the last 2 batches of ships. 1 30mm Goalkeeper located just forward of the main mast. This was capable of 4,200 rounds per minute out to 1.89 nautical miles. 1 Mark 8 4.5-inch 55 caliber dual-purpose gun, capable of 25 rounds per minute out to 11.8 nautical miles, with a traverse of 270 degrees and a maximum elevation of 65 degrees. This weapon was an auto-loading weapon system and it was fired from the ops room. And then finally, the same STWS Mark II torpedo tubes, well abreast of the funnel. The Batch 1's weapons fit was determined by the primary anti-submarine role combined with the previous need for a general purpose capability. The principal anti-submarine warfare weapon system were the ship's Lynx helicopter and the triple torpedo tubes, with the 2087 towed array sonar as a key part of the sensors. Ordering of the 22s actually proceeded very slowly, in part because of the comprehensively high unit cost of the ships. The unit cost of the last of the Leander class had been about £10 million per hull. The 21s was about £20 million per hull, and when the first 22 was ordered, the unit cost estimated at about £30 million, though by the time Broadsword was actually commissioned in 1979, inflation had driven this figure up to, surprisingly, £68 million, which was far higher than the cost of the contemporary Type 42 HMS Glasgow, which also commissioned in 1979, and she cost £40 million. The Batch 2 ships, which came after the first 4 Batch 1s, was basically a larger, stretched Type 22 Batch 1, but in addition to this, they'd have to enlarge the frigate refit complex in Devonport, which they suitably did. Now, visually, the increased length of the ship gave it a longer bow. In a sense, they had a raked bow, which was indicative of having a bow sonar, but, fun fact, they weren't actually fitted with a bow sonar, only the Batch 3s would be. Now, another important addition to the Batch 2s was the new computer system, which aided the combat system, and this was called CAX-1, which replaced CASE-1 fitted to the Batch 1 ships. The new system was able to track up to 500 targets, including those detected by the passive towed array and also the ESM. Now, the most significant change in this group of 6 Type 22s is the much more sophisticated electronic warfare systems, particularly the classic outboard system for the intercept of Soviet naval and submarine communications. These very sophisticated and specialized versions of the Type 22s were specifically approved by Prime Minister James Callaghan. Now, the larger hull actually improved the seakeeping abilities, which, to be honest, the Type 42s should have actually followed, which they actually eventually did with the Batch 3s, but that's that story for back in that brief, which I did. Anyway, the downside about it is, it never achieved the expected quietness with towed arrays that they were expecting. Now, according to Captain Doug Littlejohns of the HMS London, in operations between the UK, Iceland and Greenland Gap, where preventing and monitoring the passage of Soviet naval units was a crucial stage of the Cold War, a revised machinery installation was adopted to HMS Brave and onwards, with the Spey turbines replacing the previous Olympus turbines. The future machinery arrangement would be a COGOG system, or combined gas turbine and gas turbine. Further improvements from HMS Brave included a taller helicopter hangar, giving the ships the ability to carry a single Sea King or Merlin helicopter instead of the 2 Lynxes. Now, by 1982, it was quoted that each unit had risen to £127 million. Like, wow. Anyway, this might have been the end of the Type 22 program if it wasn't for the Falklands, in which 2 of the ships of the class were present, Broadsword and Brilliant, which we'll talk about later on. Now, these acquitted themselves very well, but the replacements for the 2 ships that were lost in the South Atlantic would be part of this class of ship. The last 4 ships were the Batch 3 ships, Cornwall, Cumberland, Campbelltown and Chatham. Now, these were greatly improved designs, reflecting lessons learned of the Falklands, as well as the weapons fit being changed, which I mentioned earlier on, becoming more optimised for the general warfare role, and only major weapon systems shared with the previous class were the 6-cell Seawolf launchers, as well as the STWS-2 torpedo launchers. Now, the most prominent thing was these ships were fitted with the 4.5 gun for naval gunfire support. Now, the XOut was replaced by the superior Harpoon. I'd say maybe superior? I don't know. But anyway, they were basically replaced by those in 2 quad launchers, literally in front of the goalkeeper. Which brings me on to my next thing of having a close-in weapon system, just in case of the ships coming into a ideal situation where they're a bit like the Sheffield. Now, in the final form of the Type 22 Batch 3s, they were the largest frigates built to date for the Royal Navy, and the follow-on Type 23s would be a little bit smaller. Now, reflecting this, the Type 22s were often deployed as flagships for NATO task groups. And to be honest, it'd be interesting to see the size comparisons between these and the new, basically, Type 26s, which are kind of borderline destroyers. And so, the Batch 1 vessels would be Broadsword, Battle Axe, Brilliant, and Brazen, and they'd be laid down between February 1975 and August 1978, launched between May 1976 and August 1978, launched between May 1976 and March 1980, and commissioned between May 1971 and July 1982. The Batch 2 vessels would be Boxer, Beaver, Brave, London, Sheffield, and Coventry, and they were laid down between November 1979 and March 1984, launched between June 1981 and April 1986, and commissioned between December 1983 and October 1988. Now, the Batch 3s, Cornwall, Cumberland, Campbelltown and Chatham, were laid down between September 1983 and May 1986, launched between October 1985 and May 1988, and commissioned between April 1988 and May 1990. Broadsword and Brilliant would take part in the Falklands conflict, with Broadsword taking a bomb through the flight deck whilst escorting Coventry on the day that she would sink. Other than that, the ships would partake in many NATO exercises, including Exercise Ocean Safari and patrolling the SOSUS line for Soviet submarines. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the subsequent collapse of the Soviet Union, they would deploy as NATO flagships and patrol duties throughout their careers, with Batch 3s doing one, maybe two, maybe a few armada patrols. Current open source intelligence suggests that Broadsword, Battle Axe, Brilliant, and Brazen were sold to Brazil as Greenla, Raidmaker, Dodsworth, and Bossiso, with the latter being sunk as a target in 2017, with Dodsworth being scrapped in 2012. Boxer was sunk as a target in 2004, Beaver was sold for scrap, Brave was sunk in a Syncax with HMS Argyle and HMS Scepter in 2004. London serves in the Romanian Navy with Coventry as Regina Maria and Regal Ferdinand. Sheffield was sold to Chile as the Almirante Williams, and all the Batch 2s would now have the bow-mounted X sets removed and replaced with a 76mm Otto Morella main gun. All the Batch 3s would be sold for scrap in 2013. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so that's the end of that video. Hopefully you learned something new, because I most certainly did. Now, if you want to go and support the channel, there is a link in the description below to the Patreon page. I would recommend doing it, but it's up to you. Also, if you want to come and talk to me, there's a link in the description for the Discord channel. There's a couple of good guys over there. We talk about a wide variety of stuff. So yeah, so thanks for watching, guys. Hit that notification button to stay up to date with what I'm uploading. And obviously give it a like, give it a subscribe if you really want to, and comments are always good. I like reading your comments. So take care. Catch you next time.